What's up, my friends? Welcome back to another video. This video is going to be talking all things hip. As you guys probably already know based on the title, I am having a hip arthroscopy done here in about a month, and I just wanted to do like a little intro video just to kind of talk about why I'm having it, what led me to this decision, the diagnosis, the surgery I'm having, why I'm having it, how I'm preparing for the surgery, and all those things. So this would be a good video for people to watch who maybe haven't decided if they want to go ahead and get a hip arthroscopy yet, or are trying to decide what's right for them. I can kind of give both sides of the story of the debate of surgery versus not surgery, and what I've been through and what might be good for you to go through if you haven't already. And then a lot of kind of the decision making. There's a lot of decisions to be had when it comes to a surgery this big. So it's always good to just kind of have information, and I just want to share all that I have with you. If you don't already know kind of who I am and my backstory, I'll just touch on that really quick. Name is Denali. I guess kind of history of how I got to this point would be I played soccer and basketball and a lot of other sports my whole life. And then collegiately, both basketball and soccer, and then professionally soccer. And I played for the last 5 years, or 4 years, sorry, 5 seasons. And then in 2020, when COVID hit, I decided to get ankle surgery back here in the US. And then while I was recovering, I was also kind of doing rehab and treatment for my hip. And that ultimately didn't really fix the problem. So that's why we are now facing surgery. So let's talk a little bit about the kind of symptoms I was having and how they've progressed to get me to this point. I would say it starts back now. In hindsight, I can tell this, but in the moment I wasn't sure that I had any issues. But it starts way back in like 7th grade when I kind of had a little tweak to my hip flexor that actually kept me out for a significant amount of time, maybe like a couple months. And essentially it was just a hip flexor pull. And that kind of never was the same. It was kind of hip flexor, kind of groin, kind of like in the middle of those two. But yeah, it never really was the same. So then in college, I had a lot of like, I guess you would say kind of like tweaks, or at least that's kind of what we called it, of my hip flexor and or groin kind of area, where I would always have to play with like a hip flexor wrap on that would kind of help me pick my leg up, because after games and after trainings, it would get like fatigued just to the max, like to the point where it was like I needed to dry needle it because it was like so tight and I just couldn't like use it to lift my leg up. So there were some theories in college why this was happening, and it was kind of like, oh, your quad is like underperforming, so every time you strike a ball, like your hip flexor is taking on a lot of the work. But then I ended up having a lot of like quad pulls, so it's just kind of been an ongoing thing. But to be honest, I didn't ever equate that to any type of hip problem. Then again, like I said, hindsight is 2020, and at the time I just thought that like I was one of the people, or maybe everyone, couldn't really stretch, like laying on their back and then bring their leg up and over, right? So that my right leg would go up and then over to my left side as like a low mid-back stretch. And I like could hardly do it. It would pinch in my groin area. And if someone was stretching me, a lot of times people would do that stretch for like my glutes, and it would pinch right in that hip flexor groin area. So I didn't think anything of it at the time, because I honestly just thought that like people weren't supposed to do that, and the people that were stretching me were in the wrong. Like they were doing something that no one should do. So, but now I know that that's kind of consistent with like a hip impingement. And then fast forward to professional, so the last 5 years, and I have had a lot of like popping where my hip feels really stiff and I don't feel like I have range of motion in it in the mornings when I wake up. And then first thing I do is I like pop it, either like in a squat and push my knees out, or I just kind of swing my hip out to the side, and it's like a really intense, jolting kind of like reset, or like pushing something back in. So honestly, this whole time, so now we're like leading up to September 2019, and I basically don't think that I have anything wrong with my hip. Like I'm having constant ankle sprains or shoulder dislocations or quads, little muscles here and there, back, but I don't have any complaints about my hip on the field or anything. And then September 2019 rolls around, and we have a lot of games because we've got the cup, we've got the league cup, we've got the regular league, we've got the countrywide cup, and we've got Champions League. So we've got a lot of games. It's typically two, maybe 3 games a week, but usually 2 games a week. You know, high level training, all that kind of stuff. And I can't exactly remember the time, like I really started to feel it, but I believe it was just at a training in between a league game and our Champions League game on the following Wednesday. So it would have been somewhere in between a Saturday and a Wednesday. And I just started feeling like a little bit of weirdness in my groin, in my hip flexor, my adductor, mostly hip flexor. And I just kind of felt like it might have been like catching a little, just a little bit of pain. I did some treatment for it and took it really easy the day before the game, and ultimately felt decent going into the game. I had a bunch of K-tape on, essentially to help me fire that muscle like easier, just kind of assist in it. And I was able to play up until about the 65th-ish minute. And then I kind of took a shot from like way too far out, like 30 yards out. And I think I went to just kick it as hard as I could. And after hitting the ball and then landing, I just felt something really strange happen in my hip, and it was kind of like a crunch or maybe like a pop. It's kind of hard to remember because I just kind of like wrote it off. Things like that happen, and I was just like, eh. And then I realized, kind of jogging back into position, that like something was off. And so I tried to play the rest of the game, and I could hardly move. I ended up coming out like 2 minutes before the game was over and rehabbing for maybe a couple weeks, and then slowly working back in and feeling a lot better, but kind of it never went away. The pain never went away. It was like, it would hurt really bad during warm-ups. I couldn't ever do the open the gate, close the gate. I couldn't do like leg swings really, like hamstring walks or whatever. Pretty much anything I did during warm-up, it was just like so painful. And I started having a lot more like crunching and crackling like on the outside of my hip and what felt like deep in my hip, rather than just kind of that one pop in the morning. It was just constant. And I was having a lot of pain like sitting, so I was like laying a lot. I mean, it was just, it just progressed kind of rapidly. And then I started having some like low left back pain and working through that for the rest of the season. And so I was kind of like taking it easy on the hip flexor, and it started to feel like maybe it was going away and healing. And then March 2020 rolled around and we went into lockdown. And so all of our workouts were now at home, and we did a lot of core and a lot of like planking and running in place, high knees, and core, to be honest, was what really set it off for me. Planking and like lemon squeezers or leg lifts or like anything that involved my core hurt so bad. But because we were in lockdown and I knew we weren't going to finish our season, I didn't really get treatment for it, and it wasn't really available. I was in Portugal and the lockdown was intense. We weren't allowed to leave our house even for groceries. So I just kind of pushed through it more than I should have, to be honest, and thought it was nothing because I didn't remember having like any recent injury. I would say as far as like symptoms and stuff from there, just more of everything. So now, like, then it started to hurt when I walked, it hurt when I rolled around in bed. It hurt when I like lifted my leg in any way, did any core. It snapped, crackled, and popped more and more as time went on. And then my back started, like low back started to pop a lot more and just feel like wonky a little bit. And then that big jolted pop in the morning went away, and that was a bit of a relief type of pop for me. And then that went away, and so then I always kind of felt stiff and not as mobile as I should be. And that kind of brings us to like last year, October 2020, I got ankle surgery and I was doing rehab for my hip for the last year. So I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, okay? So now let's go to some of the diagnoses I've had. So in Portugal, when I hurt my hip in that kind of acute moment in September 2019, they told me that I had strained my pectineus. So they thought that there's a small tiny muscle kind of in between your adductor and your hip flexor, and it's called your pectineus. And they told me that I had strained it, like I'd had some trauma to it. So I rehabbed that, and I don't know. It's kind of hard to say if that was the problem, but it seemed to get a little bit better with a lot of rest. And then I went to a hip specialist here, and he mentioned something about a hernia. So I got tested for a hernia, and then I also got an MRI of my hip. After those two tests, I was told it looks like I have some scar tissue from maybe a previous hernia, or maybe a surgery or something like that, or maybe some like tendonitis type of stuff in my like core and my abs. And I also have a torn hip labrum. I've got a hip impingement, and I've got dysplasia, hip dysplasia. So after I had that information, I just started going and seeing as many specialist hip surgeons that I could, because after that appointment, I was told my 2 surgery options. And then I was scheduled for a CT scan, and those results were going to be sent to Germany for 3D imaging. And then once we got those back, it would tell us more information and be helpful in deciding between the hip dysplasia surgery versus the hip labrum repair and impingement and FAI surgery. So let me just kind of like clarify this. So there's 2 surgeries I'm going to be talking about mainly. The PAO, periacetabular osteotomy, which is the surgery to fix the hip dysplasia, or the hip arthroscopy, which is the FAI surgery, which is fixing the labrum and the hip impingement, okay? So those are my 2 options. The PAO is a much more intense surgery. It's a longer recovery, much less likely that I return to sport, but fixes the deep underlying root cause of all of this, which is a structural problem. The hip arthroscopy is a less intense surgery. It's a quicker recovery, and it basically is less like long-term and less likely that it really fixes everything. But there's a higher probability that I would return to sport after it, because it's not altering my anatomy or my structure. So with the PAO, I would have the hip arthroscopy. So I'd have both. So while I was in surgery, this would happen in the same day. For the PAO portion of things, they would break my pelvis in 3 to 4 places, 3 with certain surgeons, 4 with other surgeons, and they would shift my pelvis so that the shallow hip socket would turn like it's like this, shallow, so that my femoral head kind of moves around too much, tearing the labrum and creating all of this mess. And so what they would do is they just kind of shift it a little, and it holds the leg in the joint socket a lot better. And then on top of that, they would repair the labrum and shave down any hip impingement that was there. So I went through a series of like decisions and emotions, and I want to do this surgery, I want to do this surgery. So at first I was like, PAO sounds terrible, I'm not doing that. And then, 2 surgeons later, after I talked to people, I was convinced PAO was the right thing to do, and if it ended my career, then it ended my career, but at least I was long-term better. PAO is used as a preservation surgery, so people who have hip dysplasia have a higher likelihood of needing a hip replacement down the road, and the PAO is a preservation surgery to avoid that hip replacement, hopefully. The thing about surgeries, all surgeries, is that nothing is guaranteed. Surgeons can really only give you information based on studies and actual outcomes, and no one's created equally, so it could work, it could not work for you, it just depends. Having surgery is always a risk, like no matter what, because it could affect other things, it could go wrong, like there could be a lot of bad things, but also some things don't get better without surgery. And that's kind of where I'm at. So I've done rehab with a couple of different PTs. Got a little bit off topic, but we'll make it work. So I've done PT for a long time. One of the protocol for deciding if you need to get FAI surgery, hip arthroscopy, is doing a cortisone injection into the hip. And if it relieves pain, then there is a higher likelihood that the surgery will help fix a lot of your problems, symptoms, all that kind of stuff. If it doesn't relieve pain, then there's a stronger chance that maybe your pain isn't coming from the hip joint itself, but maybe muscles around it or something else. So I got a hip injection and it didn't relieve any pain. So that led me to think that maybe hip surgery isn't the right option, but that I haven't necessarily found the physical therapist right for me that truly believes that I've got muscle imbalances leading to most of my pain. And yes, I have a torn labrum, but can we make up for the torn labrum with strengthening the surrounding muscles? So the reason that this seems highly likely for me is because my symptoms have gotten progressively worse since I've stopped training and stopped lifting and lost a lot of strength. So like I mentioned, this hurt really bad for me in 2019, but I was able to pretty much finish the season up until we got canceled at the end of March. And then I was still doing workouts and stuff because I was still strong and I was still able to kind of make up for this lack of suction in my hip joint. But since I've gotten weaker and weaker from the ankle surgery, it seems like all my symptoms have gotten so much worse that it leads me to believe that if I can just work on strengthening more of those deep stabilizing muscles, that I can have a lot of success with that route. So like I mentioned, my brain kind of went PAO, hip arthroscopy, no surgery, and then just cycled through all those things every other day pretty much for the last half a year. And so I've pretty much landed on hip arthroscopy with really intense rehab before to see if it helps. My surgery is scheduled for about a month from now. And in that month, I'm doing rehab with a new therapist that I believe kind of understands like athletes a little bit more and what I'm after and why I want to avoid surgery and all those types of things. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. So that's a little introduction to what's to come with my hip. So if I do end up going through with the surgery, I will document kind of all of it as much as I can. I'll try to update every week for the first couple weeks and then probably monthly for the rest of it. And specifically what I'm getting done is I'm repairing a labral tear, shaving down bone that's causing a hip impingement, and then also I'll be getting some essentially, this sounds kind of crazy, but essentially he'll be opening me up by my adductor because that's where I'm having a lot of issues. And he'll be generating like a healing process. So he'll be kind of creating essentially like micro tears in my adductor to relieve it a little bit and then injecting it with PRP. And I have adductor tendonitis on like an MRI and ultrasound it shows. So that's to treat that. And my goal is with the really intense therapy, repairing the labrum, fixing any type of excess bone that I have and treating the adductor, that I can get a lot better. I'm not kind of under any illusion that I'm ever gonna feel just like 100%, but I think I can feel a lot better and hopefully good enough to get back on the pitch, because that's my ultimate goal. I also think that with the route that I'm taking, there's a chance that I will need a PAO down the road, and I will cross that bridge when it's time, because I can't even wrap my head around that right now. So as kind of like a first video of this series, I just want to start out by giving some advice. So far, obviously, I haven't gone through with the surgery, so pretty much I've only got advice on kind of picking your surgeon, making decisions on what surgery, all that kind of stuff, and then how I'm prepping right now 1 month out. So my biggest piece of advice would probably be to see a lot of surgeons, get multiple opinions on what type of surgery is best for you, how they perform the surgery, read reviews on them, try to figure out their credentials and the successes that they've had, things like that. I saw my fair share of surgeons and I'm very confident with the surgeon that I've picked. As far as making a decision on a surgery, surgeons won't tell you what to do. They can't. They can just give you information and then you have to make the decision. So you can do research, you can try to read peer-reviewed, well-orchestrated studies and journals and all that kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, I feel like I just had to collect as much information as I could from the surgeons, from people I knew that have had these types of surgeries that are similar to me. I think what's really important with this too is to not compare yourself to somebody that doesn't have even close to a similar lifestyle as you. I'm not going to compare my likelihood to have 100% success to someone's likelihood of having 100% success when their success is just being able to walk with no pain, because I need to get back to a professional level of sport. So I'm going to compare my rehabilitation and my ability to get back to that point to people that also have tried to get back to that point. Does that make sense? Likewise, I'm not going to compare my recovery to somebody who didn't go to rehab or didn't do anything they're supposed to do after the surgery and are claiming that they've had a failed surgery. So make sure you take all of that into consideration if you're trying to reach out to other people via, Facebook, social media, any platform really. You need to understand what type of lifestyle and what type of person and what level of sport or activity they're trying to return to. And then other than that, just collect a lot of information and write it down and stare at it and just go with your gut. Try to read all the information, digest it, and think logically what makes sense to you, and ultimately make your own decision, because it's a lot easier to live with a decision that you've made rather than feel like someone forced you into a decision. And then if you have any regrets about it, there's a lot more pointing the finger and kind of just bad feelings about being forced into something rather than making a decision on your own and living with the consequences. I'm about a month out. Right now, I guess I would say I'm mentally prepping. It's just kind of like a process for me. It's a process for maybe wanting to get in a lot of last hurrahs, wanting to do all the things that I know I won't be able to do for a few months, getting some things in order, work, pretty much anything that's okay, you can't do this if you can't walk for a few months. And then also just getting all of the items that I think I might need that would help me in my recovery. So a lot of the things have been provided to me by my surgeon, or at least recommended by them. So right now, my plan is to enter into an anti-inflammatory diet 2 weeks prior to my surgery, so that I am giving my body the best chance to focus on the hip and not worry about any other havoc in my body. I have booked a hotel in the town that I'm getting surgery in with handicapped living. I am going to need an ice compressor, so I've already kind of got that sorted out with the third party that's providing that. And then a CPM machine, which is a machine that moves your leg for you after surgery. That's also like a third party from the surgery center, but they work with the surgeon, and then they've already contacted me, so that's all set up. I'm also gonna get a long body pillow because I know that I won't be able to lay on my side and stack my legs comfortably. I already can't, but I don't actually have a body pillow because I just use a small one. But I think with the surgery, it might be really helpful to have like a long one that touches my ankles too. So long body pillow. I got a stem machine, so I forget what it's called. I think it's called Power Dot, but essentially it's just a stem machine that's gonna help kind of activate my muscle. The surgeon recommended I get it, so I did. And then lastly, what I'm doing right now, on top of all those things, is getting a membership to a gym with a pool in order. I'm gonna be at the surgery center rehabbing for 2 weeks post-surgery, but when I get back to Denver, I've been advised to have access to a pool because I can do a lot more movements in the pool without pain and increase my range of motion quicker by using a pool. So I'm getting that in order before I leave so that it's all set up when I get back. And I've already got my shower stool, crutches, and that's pretty much it. Last thing I want to do is just kind of do a little mental check-in at the end of all these videos. So I am a month out. How am I feeling is the question that I'm going to answer. And I feel like nervous. I feel doubtful right now. So hopefully that changes. But right now I basically feel like because my adductor is like the main pain, I recognize that there's a labral tear, and I recognize that there's dysplasia, and I recognize that there's a hip impingement. But all fingers point to the dysplasia as being the main issue here. For example, the tear, the impingement, and the adductor pain. They all indicate that the dysplasia is kind of the leading factor here. I think that the surgery and that rehab and that all of those things will help immensely and potentially get me to a place where I can drive a car without pain, but I'm worried that it won't get me to a place of playing. But on the other hand, recovering from a PAO to be a professional athlete again with an impact sport like running, like soccer, like running 6 miles a day is just it's not very likely. So like baseball players and swimmers and things like that, they can get a PAO and sometimes get back to that high level that they used to be at before the surgery, but it's not the same. They're not running miles and miles and miles daily, sliding on the ground, getting stuck in tackles. It's just another decision. It's tough. So I feel like a little bit doubtful. And so what I'm doing to help that right now is I'm doing like super intense, more intense than I've ever done rehab as far as like muscle strengthening versus like resting. So like with a lot of my old rehabs, I've been doing like things like massage, dry needling, breathing exercises, muscle toning, meaning like getting them to fire at the right time and things not being too stiff and then too like asleep, if that makes sense. Not like muscle toning, but yeah, anyways. Now I'm doing more like intense like weightlifting and trying to work on those stabilizing muscles that I really ignored for my whole life. I am the first to admit that I only wanted to do the big complex power lifts, and I just ignored all of the auxiliary and like maintaining movements that I needed to do to keep everything healthy. So lifting dumb but hard probably got me here, and so I'm trying to switch it up to lift smart and hard. So yeah, I'm taking steps to work on kind of where my mind's at, and then hopefully in a month I either feel like I've done everything in my power to get right without surgery and I feel good about going into surgery, or I'll just be right and I'll be on the pitch. You know what I mean? I hope this is a good little intro. Please leave any questions you have down below, and I'll either see you in the next video where I'm telling you I'm not getting surgery, or in the 1 week update. Sound good? All right, see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Appreciate you. Bye.